All right. So we're going to begin. This is basically a talk about late antiquity in the Roman Empire and the syncretism of goddess traditions that happened in this period. Lots of cultural sharing back and forth going on here. And so we're going to begin with mighty Isis. And they call her Isis of 10,000 names, both because in Kemetic culture she had many titles, but also by this period because she had been what we could call the first historically recorded international religion. She spread all over out of Egypt into much of North Africa, Western Asia, across the Mediterranean, and eventually under the Roman Empire, all the way up into the reaches of Britain, Hungary, other parts of Europe. And so here's her classic form with the icon of her name. Auset is the actual original name in Egyptian. Throne, sovereignty goddess. And she begins to be depicted a lot, especially in the later period of Egyptian history, suckling her son Horus. And so this is an archetype that becomes known in Latin as the milk-giving Isis, or Isis lactans. And this was an extremely influential, Thomas has no visuals. I can't solve this problem. You're not getting, you know what? Start sharing. Got to share the screen. Okay. Thank you for that feedback. All right. So here we go. Anyway, let me go back so you can see that one.
Now we're talking.
All right. So I am recording this. There we go. That's your first image that was in the title slide. So there she is with her throne icon on her head. And here she is, Isis lactans, as they say in Latin. And so as I was saying, this is a very influential archetype spreading out through the Isis veneration across the Mediterranean and then on via Christianity through the Madonnas. But here we're seeing her in her indigenous form, and there are countless statues like this that were mass-produced in Egypt for people to have for their home altars. So this is the Cairo Museum, and they have rows and rows of these, mostly bronzes, but some in precious metal as well. And here you can see the classic crown of Isis, which she shares with Hathor, where you've got the solar disk between the horns of the sky cow. And so this is we're going to see this crown and the transformations it goes through very quickly here. Here it is again. And so the spread of Isis veneration, one of the first places is over to Western Asia, in what's now Lebanon, Israel, Palestine. And so these scarabs, the Phoenicians were very big into adopting Egyptian tropes into their art and religion. And so they made a lot of these scarabs and spread them all over the Mediterranean. Here she is again, classic form, and here with the sistrum in hand, the percussion instrument of the temple women. Here she is as the Weret Hekau, the great enchantress, calling up a serpent. And this archetype of a goddess who has attributes of a priestess or a shaman is going to run through this presentation. It's something we can see also on a more global level, but it recurs and recurs, and that's one of those murky borderlines between the determination of what are these images representing. Is it a goddess? Is it a priestess? And sometimes it's not a strict boundary there. But what happens under first Greek and then Roman rule in Egypt is you see a shift in the iconography. These are mass-produced, again, clay figurines of Isis, and there's a very wide variety of these I couldn't possibly get into. That's a whole show in itself. But just to give you a taste of some of the shifts that are going on, notably the shrinkage of her solar crown with the horns, the addition of ears of wheat at either side. We're going to see this with some other of the goddesses as well. And she's portrayed in a more Hellenistic style, obviously here. Also, the knot of Isis originally around her belly, the womb, the knot of the cervix, the womb, is now in Hellenistic representations being shown as a knot of a shawl around her chest at heart level. And so a lot of these Hellenistic forms, here again you can see this almost unrecognizable crown, more of a crest really. She's seated and still nursing the baby, but in a basket. And this ties in with a lot of basket ceremonies that women were doing in the women's mysteries in Egypt. I'm sorry, in the Greek world. So again, a Hellenization is going on. These types of headdresses also may be in that direction. But these are also still very specifically Egyptian. We don't see images like this in Greece. So it's really a fusion that's going on here. Okay. And also sort of a Europeanizing that's happening. If we look to the south, I'm going to ask you if you have your mic on or if you're using a phone, especially if you're using a phone, can you actually mute it doing it's either a *5 or a #5, because I am recording and we won't have background noise. Okay, so this is from Sudan, and this shows in the southerly reaches, still in North Africa, some of the representations of her that you can see it much closer to the Egyptian style in the positions of the body and feet. The hair looks a little bit more like some of the Greek statues, but the large breast is much more Sudanese than Egyptian. Just to show that she spread south as well as north. And then here again back into West Asia in what's now Palestine. And so this iconography, you can see the late date here. You begin to see a spread of Isis into the Madonna archetype with Christianization. But we're going to move into the central Mediterranean here in Sicily, and this predates Christianity and probably really the influence of Isaic religion in the Mediterranean. This is an older form of Sicilian culture where you have a mother goddess and there are two babies. And so stylistically this is very different from the Greeks. It has a lot more in common with both the Iberian and the Cypriot art than it does with the Greeks. But again, showing this archetype of the mother. And Ibla is the name, Mater Hiblea, I think, is what Lucia Chiavola Birnbaum nominates as the name for the ancient Sicilian goddess, the Iblean mother. And so when it says Megara Hiblaya, this means the great house of Hiblaya. That's the name of this burial grounds, and this is where she's found in. So there seems to be also a connection of this with ancestral veneration. And so while we're in Sicily, we can see layers and layers of already syncretism happening way before the Roman Empire. Greek colonists come into Sicily and they bring along not only their own deities, but they've also adopted the Anatolian goddess Cybele. And she's shown along with Hecate and Mercury in these rock-cut sanctuaries at a place called Acrae. And the name for these images in Sicilian dialect is I Santoni, which means the great holy ones. And so you see a continuation of veneration for these in the folk culture, even with Christianization that comes in later. And so there's kind of a triad of Cybele, Hecate, and Mercury in that place. But here I want to go back into the core of Cybele, where the homeland of Mater Kubilea in Phrygian language in Central Asia Minor, what's now Turkey. And so one of her sanctuaries, very important mountain sanctuary, is at Mount Sipulis. And so we can see her there cut out of the living rock, and you get some idea of the size from the trees here of how huge this is. And so you have Greek overlays over legends around all of this. But this is an ancient Indo-European speaking group of people. This Matar word we can see correspondence to in all the way from India over to Ireland. And in Asia Minor, Cybele is very much the goddess of ecstatic ceremony, of trance dance, of shamanic ritual. And so she's very commonly shown in the classical period with a frame drum in one hand and hand cymbals in the other. You can see a little lion here on her lap because the lion is one of the animals that's associated with her. And so she's also called the Mountain Mother because these ecstatic ceremonies went on in wilderness places, and especially at night, where there would be all of this dancing and drumming going on, and very strong female participation, female-dominated, actually, ritual. And so this is something that kind of scared the pants off of the Greek patriarchs when they started finding out about this. But it also spread to women in other places. So here is Cybele in one of her classic forms on the lion throne, flanked by lions. And this iconography goes all the way back to Çatalhöyük, where you have the small goddess that was found in a granary, seated on a throne, flanked by leopards. So a feline throne in that archaic period, not necessarily a lion throne. Anyhow, Cybele has this huge influence in the Mediterranean region, starting to spread around the 5th century or so BCE. Here she is again with her lion throne. And the name for her, one of her names, is Mater Deum, Mother of the Gods. So she's this ultimate source goddess who was adopted by the Romans. And actually it was an emergency that caused them to go back to Asia Minor. They claimed ancestry through Aeneas to the ancient, the Etruscans also have an Asia Minor connection. But anyway, Rome is being invaded by Hannibal, or about to, and they're all freaking out. And so they ask the Sibylline books, the oracles, what should be done. And it says, go back and bring the Idaean Mother, which is one of the titles of Cybele. And so Rome sends a ship and steals the black meteorite that was the incarnation of this goddess and takes her all the way back to Rome and installs her in a temple. And there are actually several temples to her in Rome. And you also find numerous images like this one where they show bronzes of her driving now not a lion throne but a chariot or a cart drawn by lions, still with her drum there in her hand. And in fact, one of the temples that was built to Cybele was the Phrygianum, which is underneath what is now the Vatican. And they had a deliberate takeover of these sanctuaries of the ancient mother. So here she is. This is obviously very Greco-Roman in style. And you've got the mural crown, which is a connection to other goddesses in Syria, particularly where this is an attribute of Tuche, the goddess of fortune. And each city had their Tuche, or tutelary goddess, protective goddess. So these are Roman statues of Cybele. You can see how they've completely Romanized her, but she's still got her lions there. And here's another one of her temples in Rome. So this gets, the Romans were very ambivalent about this. They really believed that she would save them from the Carthaginian invasion. And in fact, they did prevail, but they also were a little freaked out about the ceremonies, one of which involved actually a literal bloodbath. And so there was the Torabolium, in which someone would be in an underground sanctuary and a bull would be slaughtered over them, and the drenching of that blood was believed to be a vital infusion of life force. And so people would have ceremonies like this, and here you see the bloodstains on the statue itself. So anyway, she's worshipped all over. Back in original Asia Minor, you can see this very strong Hellenistic style influence on sculptures of her. There's her lions again. The tall polos headdress we're going to see over and over again here. Now this is more indigenous, and even though the inscription is in Greek, and interestingly, although this is Cybele with her lion throne, they are calling her here Artemis in the inscription. But I want to do an interesting comparison. This is from Asia Minor, Lydian actually. You've got the Greek goddess Nike of victory holding up the wreath near the head of the goddess, who herself is crowned with lunar crescent. She's on her lion throne, which also has serpents on the sides and below. We also have a floating serpent in the air, which is a theme that we already see in Cretan times, and it seems to be connected with scenes in which entrancement is going on. And so underneath that serpent is a priestess with an offering saucer, a patera, pouring a libation onto one of these classical pillar altars that you see a lot in Greece and Rome. And so now this is in Asia Minor. Now look at this, and the goddess is called Artemis, but we will call her Cybele. Here is the same exact theme, except that this time we have here again Nike with the wreath, only it's Tuche. And we know she's Tuche, first of all, she's in Syria here at Palmyra. Also, she has the mural crown. She is, however, flanked by lions, so it's still these attributes of Cybele. Do you see how these goddesses are syncretized with each other in their symbolism? But another specifically explicit diagnostic of Tuche is that she's sitting on the Orontes River, and usually shown as a male, but here seems to be shown as a female. That is specifically a Syrian or an Antiochian even image of Tuche. And then also the goddess here is paired with Baal Hadad, who is the consort of Tuche or Adargadas in Syria, and we're going to come back to that. So matron means matron or great mother. It may be connected with the veneration of Cybele that got brought over into southern France in ancient times via the Greeks. This is actually Greek script here. That's an R. And so matron is a name that was also given to the temples of Cybele. It means the place of the mother. So this all got spread, and through the Roman legions, Cybele's veneration spread to Spain, to Germany, to Gaul, which is now France, and various other parts of Europe. And this is one of the engines of syncretism, is you have these commoners of the conquered provinces joining the Roman army and bringing the culture with them. So you can see syncretism happening right here in this, but by that I mean mixing, cultural mixing, blending. We've got the mural crown. This is supposed to be Cybele, and you have her also with the Roman eagle, which we'll see in a couple other goddesses later on from Jordan. She's got grain in one hand. But look at this. They've mixed her up with Minerva because she's got the aegis with the Gorgon head on it. And we're going to see that mix-up happening in a couple other statues as well. So she's in Portugal. She's in Rome, all over the place. And lion throne, frame drum, the symbols here, and also the torch, which is something that's very specifically associated with women's ecstatic ceremonies, night ceremonies, and also particular goddesses such as Hecate and Ceres, the grain goddess, and Demeter all carry those torches. And their devotees do as well in their ceremonies. But this shows you how far all of this goddess fusion spreads deep into Asia. This is in Afghanistan at Ai Khanum, and we have, first of all, Cybele with the Polos crown being driven in her lion chariot, actually this is probably Nike, the driver. Then we've got Helios, the sun, the moon, and here's the archaic symbol of Ishtar, the 8-pointed, or in this case maybe 16-pointed star. This represents the planet Venus, which Inanna, Ishtar, Ashtar, and all of those goddesses were originally. Aphrodite as well. And then one last little bit of syncretism here is a Zoroastrian fire priest on a fire altar, giving us a little bit of the Iranian element as well. So Afghanistan is really a crossroads of culture, and you see all that blending going on there in ancient times. Cybele also had a counterpart in Thrace, and their cousins of the Phrygians were the Thracians in modern Bulgaria, and their great goddess was called Kotis, also ecstatic, also with the drum and the cymbals, which are shown here, the high Polos headdress. Here she's shown, this is quite late actually, votive plaque. And this is Macedonia, but I think it's Bulgaria. I haven't figured that out yet. Okay, so now I want to back up in time a little bit while we're in Asia Minor, because this figure has a lot of influence across the entire Mediterranean. And we know her as Artemis Ephesia, but apparently the Greek's older name that we see in Greek sources, she's called Upis. This is is the Greek feminine ending. We see it also in Isis. That's not original to Egypt. And a lot of linguistic studies are thinking, or archaeologists are thinking, that this may have actually been a Hellenization of the great goddess of the Hurrians, her name being either Hebat or Hepatu, various forms along those lines. And this T is a feminine ending in Western Asia a lot of times. So be that as it may, this is an old name for Artemis Ephesia. So here we have the Asiatic pillar goddess. This is not Greek, even with this name Artemis. This is a late overlay. She's older than that. And we're going to see a lot of examples of these pillar goddesses. High polos headdress, like Cybele, multiple breasts, crescent, a necklace, maybe grapes, lots of animals worshiping, adoring her. Let's see here. And so there's a lot of copies of this. These are all referring back to a gigantic statue that stood in the temple at Ephesus, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. And she was like 40 feet tall, or I don't think it was 40 meters. It must have been 40 feet. Anyway, there's been a lot of controversy about the multiple breasts. And it's clear to me that these are multivalent symbols, but there they are on her chest. They do resonate with breasts. The ancients thought they were breasts. They also could be eggs, figs, and other. They have a fruit-like quality as well. Along in the 1980s comes a male scholar who triumphantly announces, those aren't breasts, those are the testicles of sacrificed bulls. And a lot of academia goes, yeah, that's right, those aren't breasts, those are bull testicles, ha 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 ha. Well, you know what? This is not actually how it pans out. As it turns out, the original goddess, had garlands of pomegranates in amber that were arrayed around her, hung as garlands around her neck. And the statue of the older layers of this temple, I'm going to just go back to this a second. These emblems that we have here of Artemis Ephesia date to the Lydian temple that was funded, I have to look this up if it's either Midas or Croesus, funds this extravagant temple with all the wealth of Midas, right? And this dates to about the 6th century. Underneath that are older archaeological layers in which there was not a stone statue. There was a wooden statue. And the statue itself, through all the ages, had disintegrated. So when the archaeologists uncovered this, they found a platform on which she would have stood, but the wood is gone. And all they found was this scattering of these amber pomegranates. You can see the little pomegranate tops there on them that she had been garlanded with. And you can see the shapes of these really suggesting very much the shape of what we see in the statues. At any rate, by the time of the Hellenistic rule, you have a very strong understanding that these are, in fact, breasts, although you can see them also indicated as garlands. They also show garlands of poppies descending from her wrists. And here's the very strong pillar goddess representation. Here she is in her great classical temple, also often shown with deer. But she's not the only goddess to take this form. And so we have in Caria, we don't even know what this goddess was called, with a long veil. Here she is. This is Hera. Hera Samion, that's what's written here, Samion, of Samos. And so she too has the garlands of poppies, the high polos headdress. And in fact, we can see other coins showing Hera of Samos in this form as a pillar goddess. Here she is with the tall polos. So there's this interchangeability of these Asia Minor goddesses. Here you see the classical Greek form, so they put both of them in there. Here she is again with the garlands and the deer, very much like Artemis Ephesia. And so you can see there's an older substrate all along the western coast of Anatolia, and in fact into Syria, that you see the goddess taking this form. This coin here, a little bit later than some of the other ones, you can see the poppies more clearly, and also we're looking at her in profile, which is unusual for these coins. We also know that the temple of Hera at Samos is the oldest Greek temple. It doesn't exist anymore. But from the fundaments of it, they've dated that to be the oldest classical form of Greek temple in the world. The surviving ones in Italy at Paestum are the ones that remain. They are now the oldest. And then here's another one of this same pillar goddess form. Here the garlands of poppies come down from her crown. Aphrodite of Aphrodisias. This is a town in southwestern Turkey. And so again, this is an Asiatic form of her, and she's shown in that classical form. Like we saw earlier, flanked by the ears of grain, she has a crown of either light rays or, by some other accounts, feathers that is very strongly associated with Hera in classical iconography. And then in Syria, she's referred to by the name of Atargatis. And look how similar she is to the last one we looked at. So again, with the poppies, the grain, the rays or feathers, pillar goddess, and Atargatis is actually famous as appearing as a pillar goddess. And numerous other goddesses in Western Asia Minor. And so here we've got Artemis Ephesia with her deer and her poppies, and here is Artemis of Sardis with her heavy veils and the very tall polos headdress. So these are all different cities that were Hellenized in late antiquity, and so you get this name of Artemis applied over goddesses, which certainly would have had other names originally in the Asiatic languages. Sometimes she's aniconographic, or aniconic. She's got a stone that represents her. And this, again, is a very strong pattern in southwestern Asia, particularly in Arabia, where the goddess is represented by an uncarved stone, or maybe lightly carved. This a little bit resembles the crown of Isis. Here's another stone from this area. I think this may be Sardis as well, looking very megalithic, this undressed shape, lightly dressed shape, relief, face, garland, crescent necklace, belt, and then the veil coming around the back. So Artemis Ephesia becomes really influential across the Mediterranean. Greek colonists carry her from there to Marseille, Massilia, and so the Romans calling her Diana instead of Artemis. But you can still see that same basic archetype with the poppies. And so this is foundational not only to these colonial societies in southern France, in Provence, where the Gauls are, but also in Rome itself. The original icon of Diana is believed to have been modeled on the Aventine Hill after Artemis Ephesia. So these are syncretisms that come way, way before the period that we're mainly looking at. And then here's a really beautiful statue of her, which I really think begins to show this resonance with the African goddess. The features of the goddess are much more in line with Africa. And I don't have a good profile to really show this, but you can really see that the jaw being forward is very different than the Greek mouth that is kind of recessed in classical Greek sculpture. And we're going to see some examples right now, as it turns out, here of Black Diana. And this is a theme that really begins to appear, and or at least become visible to us in Roman times. And there's numerous Roman-era copies of Artemis Ephesia who show her as a black goddess. And so, there again, the multi-breasts. Now, when I said before that the ancients saw these as breasts, this is really evidenced for us by one of the Greek names for her, Artemis Polymastis, the many-breasted one. So this is not a modern projection, as was being claimed by Mr. Bull Testicles. This is really something that the ancients understood as being part of this. Here's some more pictures of these very fine sculptures. But she's fruitful, she's life-giving, and all of these symbolisms are enacted. They're breasts, they're fruits, they're eggs, and then you see all the animals here with their hooves raised in reverence for the goddess. So she is all living things, and you see this connection of her with bees Here are more creatures adoring her in her background full moon crown there. There's a close-up of her with the praying lions. And another view. So another interesting thing about this trope is that the Black Diana is not something that's only known in Roman times, but this theme was carried under Roman colonization into Gaul. And as late as early modern times, there was an oath in the Occitanian language, Perdiano Nero, by Black Diana. And so you see the very long persistence of some of these cultural themes, which were absorbed by the common people and adopted and preserved over all these pressures of Christianization that came along later. And finally, this is much later, but you have another copy of her being made into a fountain, where again the breasts spurting water, but actually, symbolically milk. Black Cybele also. So not only Diana, or Artemis, but also the old Asian goddess Cybele, who is shown here in that pillar goddess mode. So Cybele herself doesn't really appear that way originally, but she's adopted into this symbolic alphabet of the pillar goddess that we're continuing to see here. And she's black. Now, the interesting thing about that is that one theory could be that the influence of Nubian Isis and the internationalization of her veneration might have been something that led to the imaging of all these goddesses as black. However, Isis herself, as we're going to see a little bit further along, is actually whitened in Roman art. Here's another Black Diana. Now, I want to compare here. The arms are reached out here as they were in the classic statue of Ephesus, along with here she's got the scenes on the body, Apollo's headdress and veil, and then now look, Aphrodite of Aphrodisias. And so you can see that the names of these goddesses and their local specificity, this one's from Asia Minor, this one is from Rome by way of Lydia, there's all these different things going on, and yet symbolically they're beginning to resolve into archetypes that are interchangeable, nearly interchangeable, even though I'm sure the local people have still kept some of their indigenous meanings and specific culture around that. So finally coming to Rome. And this is a mural from the Villa of Mysteries, which I think has been really overlooked. They tend to focus more on Dionysiac themes. But you have Fauna. This is like the female faun, right? This name is actually a secret taboo name of the goddess, the women's mysteries goddess, Bonadea in Rome. And we can see here the goat goddess connection. That is Caprotina, of the goats. There's a lot of fusion happening there as well, but she's giving the breast to a little girl goat. Here's the form more likely, more commonly depicted forms of Bonadea, which simply means the good goddess. And so she's usually shown seated with a serpent wrapped around one arm and with a patera, an offering saucer, libation saucer in the other. And so there again we have this idea of the goddess as priestess. Here she is again, patera, and actually they've moved both of them to the same arm here in this relief, and the other hand is holding the cornucopia, which is an attribute that we're going to see for Fortuna and other goddesses. One more with the serpent. This is from Romania, and you can see stylistically this just could as easily have been from other parts of Europe, particularly holding what may be a beehive in one hand. That would connect her with the Celtic goddess Nanta Suelta in Gaul. And also you see the cornucopia showing up here in a very strongly Celtic-flavored sculpture out of northern England. And so the style is Celtic, but the symbolism is entirely out of the Roman world. The offering patera, pouring libation on the pillar, altar, the cornucopia of Fortuna, which we're about to see, and you can see remnants here of the mural crown of Tuche or Cybele. So this is what the Roman legions have wrought, is the spreading of all these cultural memes way into northern Europe. Here's a Roman form of Fortuna, and this cornucopia is also identified with Terra Mater or Ceres, so they're not really sure, but I would say Fortuna because she's also shown with the rudder. And there's a lot of blending, melding of Isis with Fortuna in the ancient world. This is the rudder of Isis, and so this gets mixed in with her. Isis also begins to adopt the cornucopia of Fortuna, and this is what was going on then. Fortuna is also adopted a lot in North Africa. There's huge Roman influence because of the empire on Tunisia and Algeria. And so we've got her enthroned there again with the cornucopia. Here's a Roman mural and cornucopia, and then you've got the rudder and also the wheel of fortune. And we could go off into a whole other direction here of how Fortuna is adopted into medieval European art, and especially with that wheel. There are dozens of representations of her from medieval and Renaissance times. Picking up on those themes. And then just sort of in the same alphabet, because Earth Mother, Terra Mater, Ceres, the goddess of grain, who is the Roman equivalent of Demeter, all blending together here on the altar of peace in imperial Rome. And so you've got this idea of the fruitful land, life giver, animals, plants, all that happening there. And so here is the form of Earth Mother Demeter as she is worshipped in southern Italy. And this region was known as Magna Graecia because Greater Greece, they were Greek-speaking, and they basically had, women were celebrating the cult of Demeter here for a long time, from like 700 BCE forward. You have this culture taking root there. Notice the ears of wheat in her crown. Temples to her at Paestum, south of Naples. You have the oldest Greek temples surviving are there, and they're temples to Hera and other Greek goddesses. And then Persephone, in Sicilian form, is called Proserpina. She's shown with dolphins cavorting around her. Maybe the waters of the underworld are what are being picked up on here. And Ceres, this is where our word cereal comes from. The grain, the earth, fruitful earth. There she is with her torches. And as you can see, maybe it's not her, maybe it's a devotee. This kind of looks like the rudder of Isis again. Don't know about that. But anyway, women were celebrating mass ceremonies in Rome, based in the Aventine Hill, which was a plebeian sector of the city. There were temples of Bona Dea, of Diana, of very ancient vintage in that area. And into there come also some of these foreign religions, including a lot of the Greek-speaking people from southern Italy have moved up into there and brought the mysteries of Demeter, or in Roman parlance, Ceres, into the region. And so there are these big ceremonies going on. I just need to parenthetically put in that the major temples in Rome were controlled by men, all male priesthoods, and there were few exceptions to that, which were the priestesses of Fortuna, of Diana, and of, who's the other one? Blanking. Well, think of it. Well, Ceres eventually, once a few things get resolved. So here you see a woman pouring offerings onto one of these altar pillars things. There's the drum in evidence. And so anyway, these ceremonies were going on in the 2nd century, and they were overwhelmingly female. There were a lot of people of foreign descent, out of the empire, coming in and bringing their influences through. There were various goddesses who were being worshipped there, and the Roman Senate freaked out about this. They did not want foreign religions. They did not want all female religions. female leadership, priesthood, all of that, and these out-of-control shamanic ceremonies, which that's the way they saw it at any rate. And so they had a huge crackdown on, a lot of this was referred to as the bacchanals, the Bacchantes, the women who were celebrating the Greek mysteries. And this is named, of course, after the Dionysiac mysteries, but the goddesses were very much in it, in the way that it was celebrated. Anyhow, in 186 BCE, the Senate calls a crackdown. And Livy tells us that 7,000 people were executed as a result of the basic forbidding of these ceremonies. I thought I had one more image of this. Do I? Nope. Okay, so that is what I would call the first great witch hunt in Europe that we know of, the mass repression. So you have these constraints in the Roman world. They're pagan, but they're also patriarchal, being laid down. And yet you have in the sphere of the private, or off the grid of public state ceremony, you have women continuing their own rituals, and here hanging garlands of a type that's also seen in the Greek world. And there were little shrines around the land, like this one, where it's so natural, you've got trees growing out around it. Woman is standing here with a water vessel on her head, and she's getting ready to pour a libation in offering to whether it's Earth or Ceres or Fortuna, whoever it is. And then back here behind the shrine is a group that are dancing and making music and carrying on. So there's that ecstatic dimension also happening. And that also is picked up rather well, I think, in this quite late, really modern picture of Ceres. And again, Ceres is shown as a black goddess. So this is a theme that runs through the cultural memory. And look at the women dancing here with torches. What they would do in the ceremonies of the Bacchanalia in Rome, they had torches that were apparently treated with some kind of chemical, so that when the women marched down in procession down to the Tiber and plunged the flaming torches in the water and then pulled them out, it would burst back into flame. And so this is, very impressive thing to happen. All right, so now we're going to look at another archetype that is very old in Indo-European culture, which is the threefold goddess, the triune spinners of fate, the givers of destiny, and also, to some extent, ancestral women. So in Rome, they were called parcae, those who spare, and maybe spare the mother, spare the child in that dangerous passage of birth. Here again, the cornucopia. And in the Germanic and Celtic world, we also have these threefold ancestral women who are either designated mostly in Germany as matronae, great mothers, or as matres, the mothers in Gaul. And so you have the women seated with baskets of fruit in their laps very commonly. They come in threes. Sometimes you have a differentiation of maidens with uncovered hair and the matron, the married women, with the linen headdress that indicates marriage in Indo-European societies. Sometimes they're all maidens. We've got them again with apples. So they are givers of abundance. They're also fateful goddesses. They may also be the ancestral dead, which is what makes them the mothers. And this one's interesting for a couple reasons. She's got the cornucopia, a swaddled infant, and the basket of fruit in her hand. Actually, two of them have the cornucopia. And then this background of the scallop shell, which comes out of the Greek world. And so you can see in Gaul, what happens is these did not really, this format did not exist before the Roman colonization, and they sort of adopted this Roman custom of carving marble altars or stelae in honor of their deities. And what that did for us is it precipitated to historical view this veneration, which we would not have otherwise known about. It was just going on without any iconography. But you can see that the style of carving is very Greco-Roman. And so you've got even the adoption of the cornucopia and the patera, and then you've also got the children. The offering pillar is also in there. And the little babies cavorting around them, possibly because these ancestral women are also being appealed to as givers of conception and protectors of childbirth and the nursing of the young. So this archetype is all over much of France, Western Germany. You'll find a few in Spain, a few little here and there in Italy, and also going up into Britain. And this is near the borders of Wales. And they've got loaves and fruits in their laps. So in this part of the world, both in Britain and Gaul, there is a goddess who is known as Rosmerta, which means the great provider. And so here she's shown with the churn and dasher. She is a goddess of the dairy, like Bridget. So the processing of milk into butter and cheese is part of her purview. Indigenous goddess, but then we see her, especially in Gaul, which was much more Romanized, in a triad with the Greek god Mercury, or Roman god, let's say Mercury, and Fortuna. There's the cornucopia again. And this is supposed to be Rosmerta. So we find her in Britain in this form, but especially in Gaul. Well, actually, both these examples here are from Britain, Western England, actually. So she looks very indigenous with her, she's still got the dasher and the churn, and she's sewn with a completely Roman god, Mercury. Horns, this is part of his thing. And this pairing of indigenous goddesses with Greek or Roman gods is something that was general in this period, in the 1st, 2nd centuries when these sculptures and reliefs were being carved. And sometimes she also adopts the qualities either of Fortuna or also, well, here's Fortuna again, out of northern England. Or else she adopts the qualities of Maya, which we'll get to. So we do have some of the sculptures showing a very strongly indigenous ethos, like this one in the north of England, where she's horned. Her dress has nothing to do with Roman style. This is a very archaic, almost Bronze Age cape that she's wearing. And she's got the distaff, which is something that is characteristic of Gaulish goddesses as well, as they come into view through the sculptures of the 1st and 2nd centuries. So this one, entirely in style, has to do with Roman style. But then there are these antlers up at the top, and there's no Roman goddess that has antlers. So this is very indigenous to the Gauls. And there's a few of these. Another example here, very low res, from central France. So this is a deity we don't know anything about. There are no inscriptions that I'm aware of about her. And this one here with goat horns. So these horned goddesses show up in the ancient Celtic world. And we also see Rosmerta here connected with Maya, the goddess of May. And that's a Roman name. She was a fruitful, flowering, spring type of goddess, and so the great provider, they kind of mix those in together. And what I see going on here is this gigantic hand. Great provider. She's a big giver, big hand holding out blessings. Look at these little wings here. This may be a syncretism from Mercury because he has a winged cap, and she's often paired with him. But here, look for a moment at the more archaic forms of the Gaulish goddesses. And here she is as a crone. Stylistically, this is not so close anymore to Roman art. We're going to see that even more in the next slide. There she is with her apron full of fruits, flanked by 2 young women with water jars and a little dog at her feet. And this dog appears in the Netherlands and in Belgium and in parts of eastern France with the Gaulish great goddess, one of her attributes. This is something you won't see in other places. Here she is again in France, and look how different this style is from Greco-Roman sculpture. If you're familiar with Iberian art, it's much more in line with that in the ways that they're representing the feet, the folds in her robes, and even bringing in this kind of water symbolism into the folds, gigantotorque around her neck, also apparently flanked by two girls, like our other sculpture. So this is something very different. This is a good example of how Gaulish goddesses got syncretized with Roman archetypes. So on the left here, this is a Latin inscription to the goddess Virona, Dei Vironae, very much in native style, except that the inscription here says Maior Magia, and then it has the name of the man who made the dedication of this lotus statue. Maior Magia means great of magic, and this is one of the known titles of Isis, Weret Hekau, in ancient Kemetic, great in magic. If we look over at this example of Sirona, this is from a temple of hers in western Germany. She's shown very much in the mode of Bona Dea. She's got the serpent wound around one arm. This goes back very far into the Mediterranean women's mysteries. And she has the offering patera in her other hand, but she's pointing to three eggs that are in this. So this is specific more to Germany. And that she was actually a goddess. This statue comes from a sanctuary. There was a little shrine built up over a well. And she's a goddess of the healing wells, the thermal waters, which is how she winds up being paired with Apollo, who is known for taking over goddess sanctuaries and also associated with thermal springs. And so, of course, the most famous example of those takeovers would be the Pythian shrine at Delphi, taking it over from Gaia. But here is Sirona shown with a serpent in one hand, and so this is very much tying in with women's mysteries and especially with shamanic healing. And then just one last little throwback here from the Matrone. These are the Proximai, which means the kinswomen. So again, back that ancestral women connection. And so we see things coming up into Gaul through trade and through Roman influence, such as a very much Egyptianate baubo. This is a type that's only seen in Egypt, and except that it was traded up into France in this case. But also very widespread veneration of the horse goddess, the mare goddess, Epona, where she's enthroned as if seated on a throne with the mare and also very often the colt, the young suckling foal of the horse. And so these are not only all over the Celtic country, but they really spread all over Europe because the legions were deep into her because of the horses. And so she often is shown here with the patera with Roman traits, but she also has very strong connections to the Matronae, particularly in this sculpture. I mean, she does have the horses behind her, but at the same time she's got the basket of grain or fruit or whatever it is that is not seen outside of that realm. And Epona, in fact, is not only a horse goddess. She's a goddess of birth and death, as many of her stelae indicate. She's got funerary aspects to her, which Freya also does in her horse form. And so there are just a whole lot of these. And the legions were very much into her, so they were spreading her into Eastern Europe as well, although this looks very classically Gaulish. Here she is all the way over in what is now Hungary and Romania, with the little horses eating out of her lap, or to Greece. And so this is also part of this massive cultural blending that's going on in both directions. So you have the Roman legions picking up on Gaulish themes, or in this case we have, again, Dacia is the old name for Romania, and we have the goddess Bendis flanked by horsemen, which is a theme we looked at in one of the earlier webcasts a little bit. And then if we go over to southeastern Spain, in classical Iberia, we see glimpses of the ancient pre-Indo-European goddess of the Iberians. Here she is as a winged being. And there's a lot of syncretism here, first with the Phoenicians, and then later with the Greeks in the art of the Iberians. And so this is very much in native style, but you have the Greek double Aulis, you have the dove, which is very much connected with goddesses coming out of the Levantine cultures of the Eastern Mediterranean. There's that double, suckling double infant that we saw earlier from Sicily. And so what happens in Spain is we only know the name of the goddess from inscriptions in Greek and Latin. And some of the names are really, they think that Tanit, the Phoenician, or rather Punic goddess Tanit, is very influential because of the heavy Phoenician trade that was going on with Spain. But inscribed on the forehead of this goddess, and it's unfortunately not a very good picture, it says Dea Caelestis. And this is from a temple at Torre Paredones in Spain, in the Iberian region. So this actually tells us that the temple itself was dedicated to Tanit. Dea Caelestis, the goddess of the heavens, being a Latin title that is connected with Tanit and with the great goddess of Carthage. So here are some of the pillars and stelae of Tanit. You can see how some of her icons really resemble the Ankh very strongly, and there was strong Egyptian influence on the Phoenician culture, which we've already seen. But more commonly, she looks a lot more like this. You've got a very strong skirt-like triangle, arms, and a head. So she's in an invocatory or in a benedictional pose. Very much goddess as priestess again. Next to her is the Caduceus, that's a Greek name, which was actually taken over from the Semitic goddesses by Asclepius, but this serpent staff of the Caduceus predates Asclepius by a couple thousand years. It really originates with Ishtar, as far as I can see. And then you also have the crescent and the star of Venus that comes out of the Semitic world. We see this in Ethiopia and the Phoenician world, southern Arabia. There's much more Greek take on Tanit with the fruitful, flowering earth all around her. Sun and moon. And here she is again, very Hellenized looking. But from Tunisia, the Colossos refers to, she's wearing the basket as a headdress. And these women use these Colossos baskets intensely in the women's mysteries of Greece. Lots of layers folded in here together. Juno, peacock. And so Juno gets blended with Dea Caelestis, and there's a lot of connection of the Roman great goddess with, and they even call her Juno Caelestis, with what would have in older forms have been called Tanit. And so the goddess again riding on the lion. This is a southwestern Asian theme. She's either enthroned with lions, she's in a chariot drawn by lions, she's standing on lions, which is the most ancient form, with Ishtar and Anahit and other Asiatic goddesses. But here she's riding. And what's interesting about this is that in North Africa and in Italy, she's called Juno Caelestis or Dea Caelestis. There were temples to her in Tunisia. One of the great temples of Tunisia was that of Dea Caelestis near Carthage, which got turned into a church in the early 400s. And then the clergy found out that people were coming to church in order to pray to the goddess. And so they had it razed to the ground. But anyway, what happens is the same goddess riding on the back of a lion is in Syria referred to as Atargatis. So again, the same symbolism, different names for the deities depending on the national the place where this is all happening. And there's a lot of exchange going on here between all these places under the late Roman Empire. So if we come over into Western Asia, now we're in Jordan, there are temples at Petra and another one at Khirbet at Tanur that show Atar goddess, or at least that's our best guess that she might have been called Al-Uzza, but different forms of the goddess Otter goddess herself in what's now Ashkelon was connected with fish. So we've got these two little kissing fish there on her crown, and also with doves. Here she's shown at Kibet et Tanur, a not very well-known goddess temple in Jordan, with the polos headdress, and there again we've got the eagle. This very much resonates with Cybele, as we saw her in Germany, and the flowering fruits all around her. But at Petra, you have a lot of rock-cut sanctuaries, and this one shows two stone pillars. It was very common for the goddesses to be shown in an iconic form as stone presences. And people would pour libations onto the stone, and she was present. She was invoked in the stone. But we know the Arabian goddesses, that the stones were all destroyed in the Islamic overthrow, but the goddess was said to be dwelling in the stone. And so this very probably here is Al-Uzza, and then her male counterpart, Al-Shara. You'll see in some of the later images that she is the larger one. The form in Arabian, Astart, or Aptart, for Ishtar and Astarte. And another name for this planet Venus is Al-Uzza, and this is where we see her appearing in Arabian tradition. These are northern Arabians, the Nabateans, and I got to get confirmation. Supposedly this actually has the name of Al-Uzza inscribed in it, but got to find somebody that knows Nabatean. Anyway, the thing about Petra is that I just always kept looking for more pictures. It seemed like they always showed the same pictures and that there must be more. This is the more at Sad al-Muragiya. And you've got rock-cut niches. There are three of them. This one empty. This one with a mysterious veiled goddess that resonates with some of the Gnostic goddesses of late antiquity. And then finally this one, which I am not yet in possession of a good photo of, but we can see her enthroned, and she's flanked with lions. The scholars think that this is probably Atargatis rather than Cybele, just because of her location in the Syrian desert. Here she is, Atargatis, with the doves. Of course, these doves later get hooked into the symbolism of the Holy Spirit in Christianity, and very strong female mark on those, which is why in the book of Philip they say, well, when did a goddess ever cause a conception to happen, or something to that effect, saying that the Holy Spirit had to be male. But here's Atargatis with her consort Hadad, and we've seen this a couple places already. See how she is the larger and more central figure. She's flanked by lions, the throne there. This is in the Euphrates River area of eastern Syria, Dura Europos. And here's another one, I'm not sure where from in Syria, where you've got again Atargatis and Hadad, the weather god, the thunder god. She has a crescent on her headdress. She's got a lion throne. Very much Hellenized representation of them. So this one's interesting because these two parts were separated and held by different museums. And they finally figured out that they belong together. And so we've got the goddess of victory, Nike, and bearing the zodiac with the goddess Tyche, or luck, fortune, in the center. And there's all the various signs of the zodiac. This is kind of important because in this late period, you're beginning to see there's a lot of astrology, a lot of magic going on in the Roman world. And there is an increased demonization of the zodiac and of the mother of the zodiac in Syrian tradition, particularly in the Mandaean culture. And in Gnosticism, finally, and Christianity both, you have a rejection of the zodiac, of the planets, of these powers, these spirits, as being somehow demonic, and the goddess associated with them also being demonic. And so this is already the onset of the overthrow of goddess veneration, that's happening in various cultural forms. Tuche, again, this is a colossal head on the borders of Syria and Turkey, fruits in her crown. And here's your classical form of Syrian Tuche in the city of Antioch, mural crown, grain in her hand, riding on the Orontes River. So she's the protective goddess of Antioch, but each city had their own form of this goddess as a protector. And here is Tuche again, out of Jordan, shown very much as a Fortuna type of figure with the cornucopia. So this is Jordan as well, and you can see something interesting going on here because, first of all, she's called Thalassa, which means sea. You've got dolphins and fish and so forth, and she is the great ocean goddess, which there are some very ancient, archaic Greek forms of her, as Thetis, as Tethys. Anyway, she's shown, though, she looks like an Arab woman. So this is very much a particular Jordanian adaptation of Hellenistic culture. And there's a lot of, look at this, look at the little octopus here. In the mosaics, there's a lot of mosaics, both in North Africa and in the Arab world in that Roman period. These little ceramic icons are much more typical of what the indigenous goddess looks like. They're not, I mean, this is not really Greco-Roman style. She's maybe has a cup in her hand. She's holding something, or maybe just her breast. And then also the grain shown there in the shrine. So Jordan really gets left off the map, but we can see it as part of this larger matrix of goddess culture. So Tuche all the way over in Spain with the mural crown, looking very Greco-Roman. Here she is in Portugal. And again, goddesses, priestess, with pillar altars, flaming offerings burning there. She's about to pour libation out of the patera. And here again, fusion of Tuche or Fortuna with Isis. There's the crown of Isis, which is backed up by the polo headdress of the West Asian goddesses. This is also an Isaic form in Hellenistic flavor with the knot of Isis moved up to her chest. And so in late antiquity, you have all these countries making classical style statues looking very Greek of Isis. So here we have one from Turkey, another one from Cyprus. And this is Paphos is the temple city of Aphrodite. This is where the veneration of Aphrodite begins and is centered. And originally she's worshipped in this aniconic form of stone pillars. But what's interesting to me is to see how Isis, we find Isis artifacts being welcomed in various goddess temples around the Mediterranean. In this case, in Cyprus, which is the turf of Aphrodite, and yet here they are embracing her, Isis the milk giver. We see it also in the temples of Fortuna in Italy, at Praeneste, and also at Aricia in Italy, which we're going to see in a minute. Here she is in Campania, so southern Italy. The lion throne is represented here by sphinxes on either side, and then additionally by the winged griffin. Notice also the Wheel of Fortune makes its appearance there. So there's this big mixing of symbols happening, and including the serpents on her back, which it would be nice to have a back view of that. So what happens is we have this international spread of Isis veneration all across the Mediterranean, throughout the Roman world. And women especially are being really attracted to this. Although we've been taught that both Greek and Roman religion were really centered around these Olympian gods, this classical pantheon, by the 1st century, that was not really true anymore. There were all of these syncretistic deities that were coming in, and especially Isis veneration, Cybele, all these forms that we've looked at, and these were embraced wholeheartedly by Roman women because they really had nothing to do with the state religion. In fact, they were specifically barred from the ceremonies of many of the temples in Rome, where the male priest would come out and shout, "Away with the woman, the slave, the girl." And so, they weren't even supposed to be present for those ceremonies. And so they simply adopted others. And some of them were indigenous to Rome and mixed together with Isis and Cybele and others, were these new ceremonies that were coming in, which the Roman Senate took great pains for several hundred years to try and stamp out. Ultimately, they failed. And the ceremonies of Isis sweep across Rome. Even the emperors start building temples to them and becoming devotees of them. And so you have this big shift, this big cultural shift going on under the conditions of empire, where the conquered are conquering in a mythical form, the conqueror. So Aricia is one of the great sanctuaries of Diana. And this mural of Egyptian goddess culture, here's Isis. We've got the baboon, we've got the ibises, the bull Apis. And you have women doing ceremonial ecstatic dance, and this is very much in an African mode. And so you can see these influences going on. Although the priesthood of Isis is a male-dominated thing by the time we get to late antiquity in Egypt, nevertheless you have this very strong participation of women in the ecstatic processions and dances, as we see going on here. They're central. And so these little shrines built around Rome and around the empire, there are temples to Isis in Spain, and we found aspects of her worship also in places like Bath, England, in Gaul. Chartres is said to have been originally a shrine to Isis. And so this is something that very much takes over, and even the emperors are getting into the act. You see a kind of a Art Nouveau that springs up in the Roman world with Egyptianate themes. It's all the rage. And one of the things that goes on there is you also have what I was talking about before, the shrinkage of her crown, the attenuation of her indigenous symbols. She is really being appropriated into a more European context to the point where, somewhere I have that, I guess we'll come to it later. She starts to look European. But this image here is a really perfect icon of the syncretism that's going on. The crown of Isis has been transformed. It looks more like a feather crown or a grain crown. She has the cornucopia of Fortuna or Ceres. She has the aegis of Minerva or Athena. And so all of these goddesses are being blended together. And we can see this in writings by Apuleius, who is naming all the great goddesses, Diana of Candia, Artemis, Ephesus, and he goes on listing all these nationalities and their great goddesses, and then he says, but the Egyptians do call her by her true name, which is Queen Isis. And so this is the origination of this idea, Isis of 10,000 names, or really more literally, the myriad names. And so the syncretized Isis spreads through the Roman Empire into places as far away as Iran, where you've got her again, her crown, Isis crown, very Greco-Roman looking statue, and then the cornucopia. Another little Minerva in there too. And even as far as Kashmir, which you could make an argument this is a cornucopia. The lions. And Lakshmi pretty much corresponds to Roman Venus. But here's what I'm talking about, the whitening of Isis, where you start to having her being carved as a European. And here she is with the serpent, a little bit of Cleopatra stuff going on in there too, mixed in with the old theme of the women's mysteries and the snake mysteries, which are still very current in the Greco-Roman world. Sometimes the Baobos in Egypt are referred to from the Hellenistic period as Isis Baobo, and this is certainly a Baobo form in that mode, coming out of South Italy, but riding on a sow, which is an animal of Isis as well as pertaining to Demeter. And the women's mysteries in the Thesmophoria in particular have the sow as a sacrificial animal for fructifying the earth, but sow connected with earth. Here's another Europeanized either priestess or maybe the goddess herself. And so you have these sort of mythologizations of Greek deities like Io, some think are based on Isis, Hellenizing that story, and again with the serpent in the hand. So this serpent wrapped around the hand, we've seen her with Bona Dea. We certainly saw her much earlier with goddesses. Well, there's Hogea, of course, of the Greeks. And then you could go all the way back to the Mycenaean and the Cretan women's mysteries, women with serpents wrapped around their arms that really tie in with ecstatic ceremony by women. So in this burial funerary stela of a devotee of Isis, you've got the serpent in the basket, and this is something we see referred to extensively in descriptions of the women's mysteries in Plutarch and other sources, where the women keep snakes in the baskets and then they bring them out during the ceremony, thus terrifying the men. Did I miss one there? Yeah. So I'm kind of winding up on this, so start thinking of your questions. But here we've got Medusa. This is Roman, very classic, late Roman. And summer, one of the seasons that has some of the attributes of Ceres. Another serpent woman. And Roman mosaics. And then finally what happens is you have the conquest of Christianity over the pagan world. The Roman emperors convert, and they decree that the only licit religion, religio licita, is Christianity, and that all others are to be suppressed. And this suppression goes on over the course of centuries. And in that time period, you also have the Gnostics, who have the goddess rise and then fall within their cosmology. And so you have a lot of emphasis on a female creator who also becomes demonized. And one of the forms of that is Barbelo in Egypt, who is the mother of the all. But the fallen Sophia eventually comes into view. And so it's kind of interesting because Gnosticism, which begins with a much stronger focus on the female power, eventually has a mythical defeat of that female power. Whereas Christianity, which begins as a masculine monotheism, winds up, perforce, swallowing the goddess in order to try and convert the pagan world to its worldview. And so under the figure of Mary and the saints, you have this absorption, bit by bit, of aspects of the goddess religion. And some are completely rejected because they are too wild, too much female sovereignty. You know, that original creative goddess cannot be allowed in her full form. They have to keep that handmaid of the Lord thing going. But there are ways in which the pressures from below, from the common people, demand that there has to be a great mother. And so eventually the primary mantle for that settles upon Mary, or upon Our Lady, who is not even named as Mary, but much more old form of a goddess title. So in any case, this was the battleground, because in the time period that we're looking at here, we are seeing actually the major competitor to Christianity was the Magna Mater, was the goddess veneration, which is extremely popular, extremely widespread. We can see that it had roots in all of these countries that we've looked at across the entire empire. And then eventually, in a very strongly masculinizing move, is gradually driven down by force. And not only the goddesses being forbidden in their original forms, but also the female priesthood is eventually eliminated as a possibility. You know, there's a few places where that is part of the natural culture of the region, and the Christians in, for example, Asia Minor, You've got the Collyridians and the Montanists, which is really a misnomer since the main priestesses were female and not Montanus. But you have prophetic traditions, female prophetic traditions arising within Christianity that are then basically quashed, forbidden as heretical. And so you have the all-male priesthood as a really important pillar of male domination being set in place there. All right. So I am ready to, oh, this is old. Let's switch that now. I'm ready to take questions and comments. Okay, I'm sorry. I was not looking at all at the chat section here. The picture is going to go away for a second here while I look this up and see. Terrifying the Men. Yeah, that was out of Plutarch. Well, we don't know any more about that. It's just that the fact that the women were in a state of power with the snakes in their hands, and this is Plutarch's description, not mine, about the fact that the men were afraid of the spiritual power that the women displayed in these ceremonies. And he doesn't really go into details about that. But we know that these women's mysteries, I mean, this is something also in Rome, in the Bona Dea culture, the oldest description that we have of her shrine, there was a great rock on the Aventine Hill, and underneath this rock was a sanctuary where there was a cave and there was an herbarium. And people were coming to the priestesses of Bona Dea at this natural sanctuary in order to be healed. And so they were giving them herbal medicine. And they were keeping serpents in this cave. So that's one piece. And we know from another piece, from Cicero and other sources, that Bona Dea is a women's mysteries from which men were excluded. And so it's an all-female space. And this is something that was very necessary in such a male-dominated society as Rome. Okay, anybody else got a question or comment? On the Augustus altar, the priestesses on both sides represented the world of the above and the world below. You're talking about the altar of peace that I showed, the Arapakis.
Yes.
Says, go ahead. I really enjoy this idea about how the goddess was the main enemy of Christianity, or at least let's say competitor, because a lot of people don't realize how powerful this was at the time. It was stronger in the first century than Christianity. In the second century, probably neck and neck. In the third century, there a lot of repression is starting to come in. And by the fourth century, they have outlawed it. Gradually they start closing the temples. They start forbidding ceremonies, invocations, offerings. And by the 5th century, they're finally destroying the oracle at Delphi. They're shutting it down. They are forbidding processions. We have record of processions to Isis in Rome as late as around 410. In fact, there was a big revival of people reaching for the old-time religion that happened then because the Goths were threatening to invade Rome, which in fact they did. They sacked Rome. And so people were saying, well, look, this God is not protecting us. Let's go for the old ways. And so there are a couple of these kinds of lapses that happen where Christianity is decreed as a state religion, and then people are going, wait a minute, this is not working for us. We're having plagues and we're having all these things. And so this happened in England also. They threw over their baptism, basically. Okay, anybody else? All right. Well, it looks like that's it for this time, so I'm going to close out. And thank you all for attending.